Hello, Dirty Minders, and welcome back to Roni D TV. As always, I am your host, Roni D, and today we's talking elections. Some of you may or may not know I live in Canada, and we have an election that has been called, or will be called, sometime between now and October 21st. So most likely that's when we're voting, is around October 21st. And I wanted to do a series about all the different parties and where they stand on subjects and topics and all of that cool shit, because I really didn't feel that I personally was well informed enough to make a decision, and I figured there's probably a couple other people out there in Canada like myself. Some people may not even know there was an election. Welcome. Hi. Elections are coming. So here we are. So I decided I was going to start this thing, and I wanted to do a bunch of different ones about the different parties, and then I realized that they haven't even really come out with where they're standing on anything right yet, because the debates haven't started yet. They've been programming and getting ready for the debates. Right now there's some issues with the members of the leader of the PPC party not being invited to the debates, so that's a whole thing. But we're going to get into some of the stuff, but then I realized that before I could get into the parties, there's probably some people who don't really know how our shit works. So I wanted to give some basic information, and then once we get closer to the actual debates and that kind of thing, we can go over the topics and the different discussions that are being had. I do have some information on polls. I'm sorry, I'm looking down a lot because I actually took this seriously, and I wrote some notes and stuff on my tablet. So I'm trying to keep focused. I tend to scatter all over the place, but this is important, so I wanted to make sure I focused. So we are going to get into it, and we're going to try and cover some of the basics about how the election system works in Canada. I'm not going to get into it too deeply, obviously, because, I mean, it's not incredibly complex, but it is, you know, probably more complex than I'm about to make it seem in my Reader's Digest version. So here's what I have in my election notes, so you can basically get the understanding. If you are interested in the different parties and stuff like that, if you hit subscribe and the bell and all that good jazz down below, then that'll keep you up to date on when everything comes out. I'm going to try and keep it around the debates and stuff like that, and sort of get into the parties a little bit more. I did put it out on my Facebook that I was doing this, and then I got some very helpful information about the leaders themselves, but I'm not really that interested in the leaders as people, to be honest. As individual people, I want to know what their party stands for. I want to know where they stand on the issues. I mean, obviously, if there's something incredibly bad about the leader, I want to make sure I let you guys know that. Same as if there's something incredibly good. But for the most part, I'm going to try and keep it political and out of the, personal realm. I don't really like talking about people as a person in that regard when we're talking about an office and the position that they're holding. I very much believe that you are more than the job that you do. So we're going to focus on the jobs and how they affect the people in Canada and how it all works together. So what you need to know first and foremost is there are 6 main parties on the board in this game. There is the Liberals, who are the current holder of the fort. Have been led by Justin Trudeau since 2013. Last election, they got 184 seats, and that was about 39.47% of the vote. Then we have the Conservatives. They have been led by Andrew Scheer since 2017, and they got 99 seats in the last election. That was 31.89% of the vote. Then we have the NDP, which, for those of you who don't know, stands for New Democratic Party. So that's the NDP, the ones in the orange. And they have been led by, sorry if I mispronounce this, I'm going to try my best. It's not even that difficult, it's just I'm really particular with names. So it's Jagmeet Singh, I believe. Singh I'm confident on, it's the first name I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing correctly, but he took over the NDP in 2017, so around the same time as Andrew Scheer took over the Conservatives. They won 44 seats in the last election, which was 19.71% of the vote. Next, we have the Bloc Québécois, led since January by, again, I'm sorry if I mispronounce this, Yves Francois Blanchet. They had 10 seats. They're not really big outside of Quebec for the most part. So it kind of gets a little bit skewed when we're talking about the percentages that they get, because, again, they're mostly in Quebec and not really big everywhere else. So that's something to be mindful of when you're looking at these numbers, is that outside of Quebec, there's not a whole lot of presence for Bloc Québécois. At least not that I can see here. If I'm wrong, please feel free to correct me, but I haven't really seen much from them outside of the province of Quebec, which is fine. So they had 4.66% of the vote last time, which was their 10 seats. The Green Party, led by Elizabeth May, she's been leading that since 2006. They got her seat last time. She got voted in her riding, and she got her seat, which is great. And that's 3.45% of the vote. And as of September of 2018, there is a new player on the board. I'm trying to watch and make sure my camera doesn't fall, because I kind of jerry-rigged it to make it work like this, so I think it's okay, but it's my phone, so I'm kind of a little sketchy. I know, get a better camera, get a tripod. Duh, I know, but it's not helping now. So, yes, back to new party. And this is the People's Party of Canada, and they are led by Maxime Bernier, who left the Conservative Party, I hope I'm getting this right, left the Conservative Party and started his own party. This is their first kick at the can, so they didn't really have no seats last time because they didn't even exist. I'm going to get more into that because that's an interesting party and how it started and all that kind of stuff, so that's an interesting thing. But we're going to get into that more in their episode, so that'll be fine. We also have a smattering of independents, but these are the main characters that are in our story here in October. So we have those 6 characters. And for those who might not know, because I know in the States it works very differently, in the UK it's different. UK is similar to ours, but not exact from what I understand. Canada's electoral system is referred to as a first-past-the-post system. That means voters indicate on the ballot the candidate of their choice. The candidate who receives the most votes wins. Sort of a winner-takes-all kind of thing. And then what happens with all of those people is that they go on to form the government. So we have 3 levels of government. We have the federal, which takes care of things that affect the entire country. We have the provincial or territorial, which takes care of things that directly impact the province. And then we have municipal, which is like what happens in your city, so your bylaws and stuff like that. So those are our 3 different levels of government. And then there's different people in different ridings. This is a federal election, so this is going to be for all the marbles, essentially. And every once in a while, you'll see the municipal elections or provincial this or whatever. I think provincial and federal, if I'm not mistaken, which again, if I am, please correct me in the bottom because we're learning together and that's how it works. Comments right down there, all the way down there. Okay, so I think federal and provincial sort of happen at the same time, and these are your people who go off and make your government. This next part's really wordy, so I'm going to try and go through it and then I'll explain what I think it means. Again, found most of this on Wikipedia and a couple of smatterings of sites there because I wanted to find out the basics, and I thought, hey, fuck it, Wiki's pretty handy for this shit. So, again, candidates. So, the candidate with the most votes in a riding wins the seat in the House of Commons and represents that riding as its member of Parliament. The Governor-General asks the members of Parliament to form a government, which is normally the party whose candidates have the most seats, and that party's leader generally becomes the Prime Minister. An absolute majority of the electorate is not needed and is rarely achieved. Generally, the government is made up of 2 parties, either the Liberals or Conservatives, and then a smattering of votes for the smaller parties, the party whose candidates get the second most amount of seats becomes the opposition. That's slipping. I'm sorry. Fixing the camera. All right. So, yes, party with the most votes becomes the government in power. The party with the second number of votes becomes the opposition. Now, you can have the party in power not be in majority. So they won the most votes, but there's still enough of the other parties to make up the majority opposition. So that's a thing that can happen. You can get a majority government. But most of the time, you're either getting liberal or conservative. It's very rare on a federal level that it ever goes any other way. Trying to think if in my lifetime I've ever seen it. I don't think so. I really don't. There was a blip where we had a girl prime minister for a few months, but I think she was still one of those two parties. It was a long time ago, and I was a kid, and I wasn't into politics, so I would have to look that up, and I didn't. Back to the things. So, while the topics that they're going to discuss at the debates and stuff like that, and where they stand on issues, there's not a lot. There's a lot of rumors and hearsay and speculation, and I didn't want to get into that. So what I did instead is I focused on polls, because polls can tell us where people are thinking right now. I know I think it was Conservative Party had the robo-dialing going on, where they got list of area codes and like phone number suffixes, so the first three numbers of your phone, and then they rando dialed everybody. And I know those were text messages going around from, I think it was Sarah from the Conservative Party, wanting your support. Don't give your support to anyone until you know what they stand for. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for everything, so just don't do it. So until they start debating on shit, don't tell them who you're supporting, unless you are like staunch one way or the other. But even then, you should really be kind of like looking at the issues, because I mean, just because the party's voted that way a long time doesn't mean that's the way they're doing it now. So again, look into your shit before you make your vote. Make it like a knowledgeable vote. Like, make it count for something. Make sure you're not voting against your own interest, if nothing else. The poll I went with, which seems to be the most up-to-date and easy to read, and is easiest to find when you type in election polls 2019 for Canada, is the CBC poll. This was last updated on August 15th, and today is the 19th, so that's 4 days ago, so ain't too bad. And here's where everyone's standing right now. The Conservative Party has 33.07% of support. The Liberals have 32.7%. The difference between these two is nothing. It's nothing. It's like splitting hairs at this point. So it's, again, going to be one of these two parties that makes up our government, same as it always is. NDP is the next closest. They have 13.7%. Unless there's some miracle Hail Mary, it's Liberals or Conservatives. That's how it's going to play. Whether they're majority or minority government, that's, a little more nuanced we'll have to get into. But it's going to be one of them, from what I can see so far, unless there's some major mix-up after the debates, which is possible. The Green Party right now is holding 11% of the support. Bloc is 4.3%. But again, that's hard to say those numbers are right, because Bloc really doesn't do much outside of Quebec. So 4.3% of Quebec is supporting them, which is a lot smaller than nationally, I guess. I don't know if they've taken that into account at the CBC poll, but I mean, that's something to be considerate of. The one that surprised the shit out of me, though, is this PPC party that's only been around since September. This is their first run in the election game, and I mean, it's a great first showing. They're currently sitting at 3.1%, which is not huge, but I mean, for a brand new party who's running on every single riding, that's really big. That might be bigger than what the Bloc is actually looking at nationally, because I don't think they run anyone outside of Quebec at all. So it's hard to really say, but I feel like it'll be interesting to watch this PPC party over the next little bit to see how they play out in this election and how that affects. And I'm getting into their understanding of their politics and where they stand and how they got here. It is interesting that they're at 3.1% and that they've managed to get people in all the ridings. I look forward to that episode because I think that's going to be very, very interesting. Right now, the probability of winning is 37% Liberal win majority, 27% Conservative win the most seats but not a majority, 23% Liberal wins a minority, and 12% with Conservatives win a minority. So there's, again, not a there's not a hope in frig from these numbers that I'm seeing right now that's like NDP sweeps it, or PPC sweeps it, or Block suddenly becomes all government. That would be, like, impossible. But it will be interesting over the next little bit. I hope this was sort of helpful to kind of explain the basics of what's going on in the game. So that next episode, when we start looking into the different teams that we're playing with here, and we get a little closer to the debates and things like that, then at least you understand the basic Reader's Digest blocks of how this all plays together. Hope it was informative. If you have something you would like to add, please hop on down into the comment section down there. Because I can't read your minds. Ooh, except that one. Oof, you should see somebody. If you liked what we did today, you can hit subscribe, like, all them buttons that are down there. You know how YouTube works. Buttons. Button, push the buttons. If you're on Minds, thank you very much for stopping by our little alternative hive, and I love it over here. Again, you can subscribe and all the things and the buttons and whatnot. But yeah, we're going to see you soon with one of our next parties. I think I'm still going to start with our Liberal Party because they are our reigning champions in the game. But yeah, so that's politics in Canada and sort of how it kind of sort of works. And we'll see you soon.